Do you know that Neville Goddard got a brother? His name is Victor. Victor used the law of assumption to actually have one of the largest businesses in Barbados. And to my surprise, there is a story in the book The Power of Awareness that resembles the story of Victor. And in today's video, we are going deeper in that testimonial. This is a striking story of an extremely successful businessman, demonstrating the power of imagination and the law of assumption. I know this family intimately, and all the details were told to me by the son described herein. I suppose that this is actually the testimonial of Neville's brother, Victor, because this has many resemblance with the story Neville told in his lectures about Victor, the brother of Neville. The story begins when he was 20 years old. He was next to the oldest in a large family of 9 brothers and 1 sister. The father was one of the partners in a small merchandising business. In his 18th year, the brother referred to in this story left the country in which they lived and traveled 2,000 miles to enter college and complete his education. Shortly after his first year in college, he was called home because of a tragic event in connection with his father's business. Through the machination of his associates, the father was not only forced out of his business, but was the object of false accusations, impugning his character and integrity. So, all the circumstances are bad for his brother, for Neville's brother here. I guess if that is his brother's story. But for that man, everything around him, the circumstances are all against him. At the same time, he was deprived of his rightful share in the equity of the business. The result was he found himself largely discredited and almost penniless. It was under these circumstances that the son was called home from college, so he was devastated. He returned, his heart filled with one great resolution. He was determined that he would become outstandingly successful in business. The first thing he and his father did was to use the little money they had to start their own business. They rented a small store on a side street, not far from the large business of which the father had been one of the principal owners. So the first thing he did, he actually was determined to become successful again. He had that concept of himself. He saw himself already being successful. He changed something inside of him. And this is the first step. He knew what he wanted. He wanted to be outstandingly successful. So he got to change his conception of himself. So now he's taking inspired action. There, they started a business bent upon real service to the community. It was shortly thereafter that the son, with instinctive awareness that it was bound to work, deliberately used imagination to attain an almost fantastic objective. Every day, on the way to and from work, he passed the building of his father's former business, the biggest business of its kind in the country. It was one of the largest buildings, with the most prominent location in the heart of the city. On the outside of the building was a huge sign on which the name of the firm was painted in large, bold letters. Day after day, as he passed by, a great dream took shape in the son's mind. He thought of how wonderful it would be if it was his family that had this great building. So he started to ask himself, isn't it wonderful if that was mine? He started to have an imaginal act about it. He started to have this feeling that it is already his building, his family's building. He started to get that thought and that emotion and that feeling that this is his family that owned and operated this great business. One day, as he stood gazing at the building in his imagination, He saw a completely different name on the huge sign across the entrance. So now, he is in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. He is thinking from it, not of it. Now, the large letters spelled out his family name. In these case histories, actual names are not used. For the sake of clarity in this story, we will use hypothetical names and assume that the son's family name was Goddard. I think this is Neville's brother. He is Victor Goddard. Where the sign read F. N. Moth & Co., in imagination he actually saw the name, letter by letter, in Goddard and Sons. He remained looking at the sign with his eyes wide open, imagining that it read in Goddard and Sons. Twice a day, week after week, month after month, for 2 years, he saw his family name over the front of that building. He was convinced that if he felt strongly enough that a thing was true, it was bound to be the case. He knew about the law of assumption. This is why I suggest that this story is Neville Brothers' story. And by seeing in imagination his family name on the sign, which implied that they owned the business, he became convinced that one day they would own it. During this period, he told only one person what he was doing. He confided in his mother, who with loving concern tried to discourage him in order to protect him from what might be a great disappointment. Despite this, he persisted day after day. 2 years later, the large company failed, and coveted building was up for sale. On the day of the sale, he seemed no nearer ownership than he had been 2 years before when he began to apply the law of assumption. During this period, they had worked hard, and their customers had implicit confidence in them. See, he changed his conception of himself. He became that successful businessman even before getting that building. He changed what he felt about himself. He became a completely different person. And that is required sometimes. Sometimes you have to change. When you face difficulties, don't dodge them. Overcome them. Face them. This is making you a new person that is completely different from what you have been. You are entering a new state. You are becoming a new person, a successful businessman. So he got to face some troubles, and he would actually overcome them. However, they had not earned anything like the amount of money required for the purchase of the property, nor did they have any source from which they could borrow the necessary capital. Making even more remote their chance of getting it was the fact that was regarded as the most desirable property in the city, and a number of wealthy business people were prepared to buy it. On the actual day of the sale, to their complete surprise, a man, almost a total stranger, came into their shop and offered to buy the property for them. Due to some unusual conditions involved in this transaction, the son's family could not even make a bid for the property. They thought the man was joking. However, this was not the case. The man explained that he had watched them for some time, admired their ability, believed in their integrity, and that supplying the capital for them to go into business on a large scale was an extremely sound investment for him. That very day, the property was theirs. What the son had persisted in seeing in his imagination was now a reality. The hunch of the stranger was more than justified. Today, this family owns not only the particular business referred to, but owns many of the largest industries in the country in which they live. The son, seeing his family name over the entrance of this great building, long before it was actually there, was using exactly the technique that produces results. By assuming the feeling that he already had what he desired, by making this a vivid reality in his imagination. By determined persistence, regardless of appearance or circumstance, he inevitably caused his dream to become a reality. This man changed his life and his family's life. He actually changed the reality he was living in. He changed his conception of himself. And as a byproduct, everything in his reality changed. For 2 years, he persisted in what he's imagining. And you guys can't stand to do it for 2 days. You guys are kidding me. I'm talking to myself too. Sometimes I look at it after 2 hours. And don't get me wrong. You can get it in 2 hours. You can get it in 2 seconds. You can get it now because everything is here and now. Your failure to believe that you have it is the reason that you don't see it. This guy had to go through all of this because he imagined himself in the beginning of his story as a successful businessman. He made that impression in his mind. He shifted in the multiverse to become the man he imagined himself to be, a successful businessman. He changed his conception of himself. So obstacles became a normal thing for him until he became that person that can deal with anything. Any hardship is just as easy as just open up a bottle of beer. This is how the law of assumption works. Sometimes your conception of yourself will change by facing difficulties, and sometimes magical things will happen. All you have to do is persist in what you have imagined. Persistence is the answer. Persist in the thing that you have imagined and see the magic happens. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe to the channel. Like to reach more people, tell me down below in the comments what do you want to see next. Check out the ebook in the description box. And until next video, I will see you soon.